Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd family a part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. Today I want to come on here before it gets too late and all the NFL games start for all of you that watch the NFL. If you come on here live, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below. Make sure you give the video a like, a thumbs up. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so and share the video on all social media platforms. Hey there, Marcus. And I have always thought it was funny how your name is Marcus from Georgia, so you're letting the whole world let everybody know that you are the Marcus from Georgia. Hey there, Austin. Glad to have you here. But I want to talk some college football now that all the first round playoff games are over with. And I thought it was funny yesterday that two of the three playoff games were on TNT. I'm fantastic, Austin. Thank you for asking, which I mentioned the other day when I was talking about the games that a couple of the games are going to be on TNT, and they're always on ESPN, so it was funny to see them on TNT, but I wanted to explain why they were on TNT. But if you watched them, it was funny because when I was watching the Clemson game, they had Dave Pasch and they had Dusty Dvorak and they had Taylor McGregor and they had who was the other sideline reporter? Laura Rutledge. No, Austin, the playoffs have not been on TNT before on there, and those are all ESPN employees. So basically, I guess they signed some kind of contract to where the ESPN commentators could call the game for TNT, but they couldn't say TNT. They kept talking about the score and they would go to break. And they even talked about the games being on. And then they talked about the Tennessee Ohio State game coming up later on ESPN. But during the game, they never said you're watching the college playoffs on TNT or Turner Sports or nothing. Hey there, Bally. You live in Bally. Well, thank you for being here all the way from Bally. Your name on here is Bally Nature Treks and Art. Well, thank you for being here. I think it's the first time I've seen you in the comments section, so give the video a like, a thumbs up. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so. And Austin, I will watch NXT sometime. It probably won't be Tuesday night because we have our family Christmas get-together on Christmas Eve, but I will watch it sometime. All of mine record automatically, and I just watch them whenever I can. But the reason why those two games are on TNT is because there were two NFL games yesterday, which, by the way, the Ravens beat the Steelers 34-17. Now, with two games to go, those two teams are both 10-5, and they have beat each other once. So that tiebreaker's out of the question. So with two games to go, there's a chance that the Ravens and Steelers may finish tied atop their division and have to go with tiebreakers. And the Chiefs in the other NFL game beat the Texans 27-19. The Chiefs continue to win one-score games. But there are some markets where college football will beat the NFL. I'll see you next time, Bally Nature. Thank you for being here, and thank you for subscribing. Tell your friends, tell your family, and I would greatly appreciate it. But in most markets, the NFL destroys college football. It's not even close, and ESPN knew that, so what they did was they sold the rights of those first two games to TNT. That way, if the ratings come out and the NFL just destroys the college football playoffs, ESPN can say, well, wasn't our fault. We didn't carry the game. Can't blame us. But now, if by some chance the ratings come out and college football playoffs win, then ESPN is going to feel stupid. But I don't think that'll happen. I think there's a couple of markets where it might be close and college football might even win, but in most markets, it's not going to be close. The NFL regular season is going to destroy the college football playoffs, and you hate it. That's just the way that it is. Nobody can compete with the NFL. You know, it used to be for years and years and years, Christmas Day was dedicated to the NBA. And if you were home or with family and you wanted to watch sports on Christmas, you pretty much had to watch the NBA. Well, then a couple of years ago, the NFL said, you know what? We're going to start carrying NFL on Christmas. And now people don't even remember that the NBA is even on Christmas Day. Why? Because the NFL is on. So if you're wondering why those two games yesterday were on TNT, that's the reason. ESPN sold the rights to TNT so that if the college football playoffs get destroyed in the TV ratings, ESPN can say, wasn't our fault, nothing we did. We didn't carry the game. It was just funny to see ESPN employees calling the game on TNT, and never not one time did they say, you're watching the first round playoffs on TNT. They would just tell you the score, it'd go to break. Even the halftime show was ESPN employees doing a halftime show from the ESPN studio, but not saying TNT. They even had the same graphics as ESPN, except for the bottom corner, it said TNT instead of ESPN. But on to the games. If you have any thoughts on it, please feel free to let me know. And no, Austin, I don't think I've watched Northwest Pro, but maybe I'm wrong. I've watched so many kinds of wrestling throughout my life that I can't possibly keep up, and I don't write it down, but that does not sound familiar. Not to say I haven't watched it, but it does not sound familiar. Notre Dame Friday night beat Indiana 27-17. For the most part, the game was all Fighting Irish. I give Indiana credit because in the fourth quarter they didn't just lay down and quit. They came back and, made it a relatively close game. They could have easily just rolled over and quit because they got dominated in the first three quarters. And I mentioned this in my video the other day, but this is not your typical Notre Dame team that's just getting hyped because they're the Fighting Irish and they're not really good. This Notre Dame team is really, really good. And if they went on to win the national championship, it wouldn't surprise me. I don't want that to happen. I don't think that will happen. But if it did, it wouldn't surprise me. They're actually not hyped just because they're Notre Dame. They're actually really, really good this year. And I read an article that I found funny. I believe it was this morning, but it might have been between the Clemson game and the Tennessee game last night. I can't remember. But I was talking about Indiana's coach, Curt Cignetti. He was the coach of James Madison, and he apparently had considered staying at James Madison. And according to his wife, and I don't think his wife would lie, but according to his wife, she claims that he was asked to be the head coach in Indiana, and he wasn't sold on taking the job. But when he was shown Indiana's schedule for the 24 season, he saw it and he said, you know what? I think I'll take that job. And he took it. So if Indiana's schedule wouldn't have been what it was this year, Curt Cignetti may not be their head coach right now. So they got lucky because that man is a great head coach. And Austin, I don't think NXT will go to Netflix. I could be wrong, but I don't think it will because you want to have NXT on free television so that it gives people a reason to go to Netflix and watch Raw so they can see the future of what Raw might look like. But if they got to pay to see NXT, they might not do that. So I don't think NXT will go to Netflix, but never say never because you just never know. But Penn State defeats SMU 38-10. And Penn State's another one of those teams that doesn't get the credit they deserve because James Franklin can't ever win a big game. And Penn State every year has one or two games that come down to the wire, and you scratch your head because they win by one or two, and you wonder, how can they do that? But it's not like Penn State's the only team that does that. I think I read an article the other day that said you have to go back to the Nebraska team in the mid 90s to see the last time that a national championship team won every game by at least double digits. Every year, every team has one or two games that come down to the wire. No team ever wins every game by 20 points or more. It just doesn't happen. But for some reason, Penn State's one of those teams where you look at their schedule and you're like, they beat Minnesota by one. They beat USC by, I think it was one or two. How'd they do that? But every team does that. But Penn State actually has a really, really, really good defense. And they could have an explosive offense. But James Franklin just wants to be a ball control coach to go out there and score 21 to 24, knowing that if they don't turn the ball over, they're going to be hard to beat. But they're top 10 in America in defense. And if they don't turn the ball over on offense, they're also going to be really, really, really tough to beat later on inside the playoffs. And I do think they beat Boise State in the next round. Texas beats Clemson 38-24, and I said that Clemson would score about 17, so they actually scored more than I thought they would. But, Texas is top 10 in the country in overall defense. So to have 400-plus yards of offense on them and to score 24, all in all, that's not a bad offensive showing for the Clemson offense. But they had the same problem they've had all year long. They cannot stop the running game. They can put all 11 guys on defense up on the line of scrimmage, and the offensive team can look at them and say, hey, we're going to run the ball to the left side, and they'd still get 9 yards. The Clemson defense just cannot stop the running game, and Texas ran the ball, and it just consistently, continuously, over and over again worked. They actually threw the ball more than I think they should have thrown the ball. They didn't throw it much. They threw it 25 times, maybe. I haven't seen the final stats, but it seems like it was 25 times, maybe. But if I was Steve Sarkisian, I'd have thrown the ball 12 times because there's no reason to throw the ball because Clemson could not stop the running game. And this game actually ended up being very competitive. It didn't seem that way because in the first half, every time Texas touched the ball, they scored. And it was 28-10 at halftime. But Clemson actually got it to 31-24. But then as soon as they got it to 31-24, Texas came right back and scored and made it 38-24. And then Clemson got it back, drove down to the Texas 1 yard line, and had a 3rd and goal and a 4th and goal from the 1 and couldn't get in. And I think they turned the ball over with 7:08 to go in the game, and I knew right then it was over. But it was actually a very competitive game because Clemson didn't quit. They kept playing hard, kept trying. But I made a video a few weeks back that said that I think Clemson has new coordinators on both sides of the ball. I still feel that way. I think the defensive coach, Wes Goodwin, will either get fired or feel the pressure and step down on his own, but I think he gets fired. And I think Garrett Riley leaves on his own. Just watching Garrett Riley and watching what he's done in the past with other teams, he just doesn't seem happy at Clemson. I don't know if him and Dabo don't get along or if he doesn't like living in that small area and small community used to being in the big cities and big states. I'm not really sure, but just watching Garrett Riley, he just doesn't seem happy. So I think Garrett Riley will leave on his own, and I think Wes Goodwin will get fired. That's just my opinion. I felt that way since mid-October, and I still feel that way. So I think they'll have a brand new offensive coordinator and a brand new defensive coordinator in 2025. But they were more competitive than I thought they were going to be. I thought they'd get destroyed. So losing by 2 touchdowns was actually fine with me. But Cade Klubnik played his butt off. Texas had only given up 4 passing touchdowns all year long, and Cade Klubnik had 3 in one game. That tells you how good Cade Klubnik was. And then the last game last night was the game that I have to apologize because I came on here and said I thought it was going to be the best game of the first round, and it might have been the worst game of the first round. This game was never competitive. And I said on here that I thought Ohio State would win the game, and they did, but they won it convincingly. I thought it would be a lot closer than what it was. But I picked the Buckeyes for 2 reasons. One, they were the home team, and 2, Tennessee thinks that football is only 3 quarters, and some weeks they think football is 2 quarters. But in every meaningful game that Tennessee's played this year, they have looked absolutely abysmal in the first quarter. I mean, in the first quarter, they just looked absolutely awful. And I knew, as good as Ohio State was and is, you're not going to get way behind on them and come back and win the game. And, Tennessee was the only team in America that had not given up more than 19 points in a game through the first 9 games. And then in their 10th game against Georgia, Georgia scored 31, but it took almost the whole game to get there. Ohio State scored 21 in the first 12 minutes. I think there was 3:13 to go first quarter. It's Ohio State 21, Tennessee nothing. And I said right then, okay, this game's over with. But Ohio State let Tennessee get a little bit closer in the second quarter and make the game look competitive. But the Buckeyes win 42-17, and honestly, they probably could have scored 50 plus had they chose. Tennessee's been top 10 in America all year long in defense, but if you'd have watched last night's game and had not watched the Vols previously this year, you would not know they were top 10 in America in defense. They looked awful. Anything the Buckeyes wanted to do on offense, they did. The game was never close. And honestly, I wish the brackets were a little bit different than what they were, because if you watched Ohio State and Oregon in the regular season, if that wasn't the best game of the regular season, it was at least number 2 and number 3. And I'm saying this as a bystander that doesn't have a keen eye toward anybody. Even as a Clemson fan, I'm not going to tell you. Now, I might say it in a joking way, but in a serious way, I'm not going to tell you that they played the best game this year, because they didn't. But a lot of people, if they like a team, they're going to tell you, oh, my team's game was the best. Or if they hate a team, they're going to tell you that game sucked because they hate a team. I'm not going to do that. I'm not an Ohio State fan. I'm not an Oregon fan. I can look at things from an honest perspective. And that Ohio State-Oregon game, if it wasn't the best game in the regular season, it was number 2 and number 3. But I think it was the best game in the regular season as far as it was the most competitive the entire game. There was never a time in that game where you watch it and say, well, the Buckeyes win this game or Oregon wins this game. It came down to the wire. And if Will Howard had have slid down 1 second earlier, the Buckeyes had a chance to line up for a game-winning field goal. I mean, the game literally came down to the last play. But they're going to play next week. And if it's going to be as good as it was in the regular season, and I don't see why it wouldn't be, you don't want the best playoff game to be in the second round. You want the best playoff game to be the national championship. So if Ohio State Oregon is going to be the best game in the playoffs, I would rather it be in the national championship instead of in round 2, and then the winner goes on to play for the national title and then, blow somebody out of the water or gets blown out of the water. I want the best playoff game to be in the national championship. But Ohio State Oregon will play in round 2. Texas will play Arizona State in round 2. Penn State will play Boise State in round 2, and Notre Dame will play Georgia in round two. But of course, we'll talk more about those games as they get closer. But I just hate that Ohio State and Oregon might be the best game of the playoffs. And it will be if it's as close as it was in the regular season. But instead of it being for the national championship, it's going to be in round two. But a lot of people are up in arms about all these games this weekend being blowouts. Thank God Clemson came back and made that a two-score game. But Notre Dame beats Indiana by 10. Penn State wins by 28. And then the Buckeyes win by 25. But, I talked about this during the regular season, but, it was hard the last couple of years finding 4 good teams for the playoffs. So if you can't find 4 good teams, what makes folks think you're going to find 12 good teams? There's not 12 good teams in college football. So if you don't have 12 good teams in college football, you're not going to have all close playoff games. It's not imaginable that you can have not 12 good teams, but yet all your playoff games are blowouts. It's just not going to happen. You're going to have blowouts. If you can't have good, meaningful regular season games from everybody, you're not going to have close playoff games. You're bound to have blowouts. And luckily, the home team won every game. And I say luckily because it would be bad if, these home teams are so much better than their opponents and then they go out there and get beat. So luckily for all the home teams won. We just have to hope that in round two, all the games are a lot more competitive, and I think they will be. But, I even talked about this last year here on the channel, that I wasn't sure there was 4 great teams last year to make a great 14 playoff. So if you don't have 4 great teams, you sure don't have 12 great teams. And if you don't have 12 great teams, you're not going to have all close playoff games. Somebody's going to get blowed out. Now, I didn't think it'd be all 4 games, but really score-wise, the Indiana game might have been a little closer, and the Clemson game might have been a little closer. But the Clemson game was the only game that was actually competitive. Clemson came out and scored first, and you thought, okay, here we go. And then Texas came right back and scored 2. But then as soon as the second half started, Clemson started making a comeback to make the game close. But the Indiana scores came late in the game when the game was over with. So by all accounts, really truly the only game that was competitive at all was the Clemson-Texas game. And I thought the Ohio State-Tennessee game would be good. But really, Nico, he missed some throws, made a couple of bad throws, but he was the only player on Tennessee's team that even looked like he belonged on the field with Ohio State. Tennessee's offensive line looked like garbage. Their running game was awful. Their receivers were no-shows. Their defensive line, which has been really good all year long, looked awful. Their linebackers looked awful. The only player for the Vols on either side of the ball that looked like he belonged on the field with the Buckeyes was Nico. The other players on both sides of the ball looked outmatched. Tennessee looked like they were unprepared, and they looked absolutely awful. And I thought as much junk as they talked the last couple of weeks, they would go in there and look competitive, and they didn't. There was even some people that had a fit that some Buckeye fans sold their tickets to Vol fans. Now, granted, Ohio State Stadium holds over 100,000 people, so it was still way more Buckeye fans than Vol fans. But only 4 teams got to host their first ever playoff game, and Ohio State's one of them. And then you got 25,000 of their fans selling their tickets. Now, I think they done it because most of them were convinced Ryan Day can't win a big game, so I'm not going to watch us lose. But there's only one first time, and that was the first time ever, and it will always be the first time ever Ohio State hosted a playoff game, and you sold your ticket. And not only did your team win, they won in dominating fashion, and you sold your ticket because you think for whatever reason Ryan Day can't win a big game. But one thing to remember as we continue going here, and by the way, today's topic is swimming. And when everybody is ready, let's dive in. And that's your dad joke of the day. But on a serious note, as we go along here, one thing to remember is that there are only two current coaches who have won a national championship, and that's Kirby Smart and Dabo Swinney. And of course, Dabo's now out of it. So we have a 7 and 8 chance, which is about 87% chance, that we're going to see a first-time national championship winning coach this year. If we do, who will it be? Will it be Marcus Freeman? Will it be James Franklin? Will it be Steve Sarkisian? Will it be Ryan Day? Or will it be one of the coaches that didn't even play yesterday? But unless Georgia wins it all, we're going to see a coach win his first national championship this year. And now that my team is out of it, I hope that happens because it's good for the game to see different teams win it. I mean, just think about how many fans got turned off by the fact that Alabama was winning it every single year. Now, if you're a Bama fan, then of course you love that. But if you're not a Bama fan, you don't want to see the same team win it every single year. Just like in the NFL, you had a lot of fans that got tired of seeing Tom Brady and the Patriots win it every year. And now you got a lot of fans that get tired of seeing Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs win it every year. You know, NASCAR took a big, huge cut in the early 2000s because Jimmy Johnson won 5 straight NASCAR championships. And unless you're a Jimmy Johnson fan, you don't want to see the same driver win the championship every year. So now if Georgia wins it this year, you're going to have a lot of fans saying, you know what, I'm tired of watching it. I'm not going to watch it. And then the end result's going to be the same thing. Georgia's going to win it. Now, of course, if you're a Georgia fan, you love seeing that. But if you're not a Georgia fan, you don't want to see Georgia win the national championship every single year. But if they win it, it'll be their third in 4 years. So that's not every year, but it's pretty doggone close. So unless you're a fan of a team or a driver or a player in golf, you don't want to see the same team or the same player win the championship every single year because it gets old. So there's a 7 and 8 chance that we're going to see a coach win his first national championship this year. And I hope if that happens, I hope that it is Kenny Dillingham or Spencer Danielson, only because they're the coaches that nobody expects them to win it. Almost everybody has those two coaches and their teams going out next week. I will see you next time. Marcus, enjoy watching the Falcons. I was trying to get done before they came on today, but of course they're playing the Giants, so I don't think the game will be competitive because the Giants are flat out awful. But I'll see you next time, Marcus. Thank you, as always, for being here. But that does it for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.